So Tna Impact took place once again in Glasgow, Scotland. The show starts with Montel Porter and the American Wolves walking backstage in an area of the arena. Then we see Eric Young and Abyss brawling backstage, which means the start of the Monsters Ball match. Eric Young versus Abyss. Solid match. The match ends with Young on the top rope and Abyss positioned on the middle rope as Young does a float over and then executes a power bomb, causing Abyss to land on the thumbtacks on the mat. Young goes back to the top rope, but Abyss slugs him, which knocks Young off, and the fall puts him through a table outside the ring. Abyss tosses him back into the ring and goes for the pin, but Young gets his foot on the rope. Abyss leaves the ring, and from under it, he pulls out his signature plank of wood with the nails sticking out. He goes back into the ring and prepares to hit Young with the plank, but Young rips off Abyss's mask. Dumbass Joseph Park, no, Abyss, drives Young into the mat with the black hole slam for the 3. The winner of the match, Abyss. After the match, Abyss, Park, grabs a piece of a mirror and looks at himself, not believing that he's Abyss. TNA seems to be itching to want to return to featuring Dumbass Joseph Park because the unmasking of Abyss may indicate a mental conflict. Park may try to suppress being Abyss in order to function the way he prefers, and Young could continue to try to convince him as to whom he really is. This storyline needs to be wrapped up as soon as possible so that Young can move on to something better, and Abyss can do whatever. So then we see Robert Roode and Dixie Carter backstage. Roode presents a contract for a world title match against Magnus at Lockdown and demands her signature. Dixie wants to know why she's supposed to accept what the wrestlers want her to do when they want her to do it. Roode says that the reason why is because of the jobs that he has done for Dixieland. She tells him that the presence of the new investor has changed the situation and caused her to lose some juice. But Roode doesn't care. Dixie says that if he faces Samoa Joe in a #1 contendership match later in the show, that will give Roode the opportunity to go up against Magnus. Because of Joe's intensity level being at a tenacious high, Roode doesn't want any part of that. Dixie reminds him that the other members are there to help him, just as they did in his recent match against Sting. But Roode warns her that if he's being purposely led to fail, he will make sure that she regrets it. We're still in a vague area as to what remaining power Dixie may have left, since the new investor seems to have absolute power, yet she can still make this match for Roode. Hopefully there will be more definition as to what Dixie can or cannot do. So then we see Montel Porter come to the ring. Porter says that during his time off the radar, he's been doing what he wants to do, and he's learned that there are repercussions for unforgivable behavior. He says that individuals in the company feel that they can operate outside of that scenario, but he says that will come to a stop soon. Porter calls out Dixie, not by name, for being a leader who does what she pleases without thinking about anyone else. He says that he loves the business and that he doesn't want to see it die. Porter says that rectifying the situation means more than just doing something as a wrestler. He says that he and unknown others pooled their money together and decided to put it behind TNA so that it can become the company that represents the fans and the wrestlers. Porter says that despite the company's assets, bad leadership has kept it from achieving maximum growth, and he plans to end that. As Porter prepares to discuss his plan for modification, Rockstar Doug comes to the ring. Dud tells Porter that he should have an initial meeting with Dixie to discuss how TNA should progress. Porter decides to make a match between Magnus and Kurt Angle, non-title. Porter was okay here, but this is the beginning of the storyline that now becomes the focal point of the company for the next several months. I just don't think that Dixie and Porter are strong enough together to carry it. Certainly not for the next perceived 8 months leading up to Bound for Glory. So then we see Bully Ray backstage standing behind his coffin. He says that because Mr. Anderson caused the demise of Aces and Eights, he will separate Anderson from his wife and kids by meeting him in a coffin match next week and putting him in it. Bully Ray says that the next guy he lays his eyes on will be put in the coffin as a direct sign of his intentions for Anderson. So then we see Chris Sabin backstage in a violet-tinged room. He says that Velvet Sky destroyed him emotionally and he wants her back. Sabin says that he has something planned for her. Okay. So then we see Christopher Daniels, Curry Man, come to the ring and dance. Then Bully Ray comes to the ring, pushing the coffin. He and Curry Man stand at opposite corners, and Bully Ray tells him that he chose to come to the ring at a moment that he will regret. Curry Man goes into hype mode, charges Bully Ray, and gets a boot to the face. Bully Ray picks up Curry Man for the pile driver and calls out to Anderson before driving him through the mat. He pushes Curry Man out of the ring with his foot, opens the coffin, and places him inside, but not before telling Mr. Anderson that his tenure in TNA will be over soon. This coffin match next week should definitely be the end of this program between Bully Ray and Mr. Anderson. TNA should have Bully Ray ditch the hybrid heel persona that he's doing and go back to the unrelenting badass that he was before when he was with Aces and Eights, but without the references. Whether Samoa Joe wins the title at Lockdown or not, a program between Samoa Joe and Bully Ray has the potential to be incredible. But Bully Ray would have to become Bully Ray again. So then we see Dixie Carter and Magnus backstage. Magnus bitches about having to wrestle Kurt Angle, but Dixie wonders what he's worried about since the belt is not on the line. She assures him that his concern has no steam behind it, and Magnus tells her that she better make sure of that. We see Rockstar Dud sitting across from Dixie, and he buries himself farther up her ass than he already is. There's a knock on the door, and they think that it's Montel Porter, but it's Ethan Carter III. Ethan wants to discuss something with Dixie, but she doesn't want to hear it because Magnus's match with Kurt Angle and her meeting with Porter have taken a higher priority. Ethan says that the fact that he's her nephew should take importance over anything else. Dixie tells him that they can talk at a later time, preferably in 7 days. Magnus is just not being portrayed well as a strong champion. In addition to having Dixieland bail him out of title matches, he comes off being fearful of whomever he faces in the ring. His title isn't even on the line against Kurt Angle, and he's spazzing over it. As far as Ethan goes, the more Dixie chooses to ignore him, the more he feels that he has to do something to prove that he has value with Dixieland and that he's worthy of her attention. So then we see Austin Aries come to the ring. He makes his usual introduction and says that a championship is defined by the wrestler who holds it. Aries drops the fact that he has been decorated with major gold and that he is the originator of Option C, which allowed him to become world champion. He says that he's going to do it one more time. Then the glorified jobbers come out. As Aries addresses why they're out there, Zema Ion hits him from behind with the X Division title shot briefcase. Aries gets up, but Ion nails him again with the briefcase, this time from the front. He announces that he's going to use up his title shot opportunity, which leads to the X Division Championship match. Austin Aries defending against Tna Ion. Decent match. Ion calls for a referee and goes for 3 consecutive pin attempts, but Aries kicks out each time. Ion throws Aries out of the ring. He comes off the ropes and hits Aries with a sliding drop kick through the ropes. Ion tries to whip Aries toward the ring post, but Aries stops his momentum and turns to kick Ion in the midsection. He slams Ion with a blow to the chest, but Ion responds by grabbing Aries by the front of his pants and sending him into the guardrail. Ion throws him back into the ring and executes a tornado DDT. He goes for 2 straight pin attempts, but Aries avoids the pin both times. Ion goes to the top rope and executes a corkscrew. But Aries moves out of the way. He pushes Ion into the ropes, and as Ion comes off the ropes, Aries hits him with a discus forearm. Aries executes a shin breaker and then delivers a leg hook Saito suplex. He hits Ion with a running drop kick and follows that with a brain buster for the 3. The winner of the match, Austin Aries. Both Aries and Ion deserve to have more time for this match, which should have been presented as a standard match. I have said before that Tna Ion is a promising young wrestler, even if he's doing this lame DJ act with the glorified jobbers. The feast or fired angle cheapened how he was presented. It made him look like he was unworthy of having a match longer than a couple of minutes. Austin Aries came off well here, and hopefully we will not only see Aries more frequently, but we will see him focus on option C and the world title rather than Velvet Sky and her pigeon. So then we see, briefly, Dixie Carter and Rockstar Dud preparing to meet Montel Porter. So then we see Christy Hemme backstage working on her makeup in the mirror when Sam Shaw comes up behind her and startles her. Christy brings up the video of his shrine room, and he tells her that he likes to take possession of certain items and keep them as a tribute that reflects the beauty of the woman in which he's interested. She asks him about the mannequin, but he says nothing. Christy puts him over, but she tells him that she wants their relationship to stay within professional boundaries. He reluctantly agrees. She leaves, and he responds with a cold look. Tna made a good decision to have Christy acknowledge that she saw last week's video from Shaw's apartment. Otherwise, the buzz as to why Christy doesn't watch Impact would have grown louder. However, Christy should have been angrier with Shaw about his obsession with her and should have told him not to talk to her ever again. The man had a mannequin that was supposed to resemble her in a private room with her photos all over the wall. If she had expressed herself that way, Shaw's cold look would have been more justified because of the fact that he allowed her to take control of the situation. Of course, he will try to take that control back. So then we see Robert Roode backstage. Roode continues to express how pissed off he is about continuing to do jobs for Dixieland when he was promised a title shot against Magnus. Magnus appears and tells Roode that he should just do what he's told. Roode informs him that he was responsible for Magnus winning the unification match against AJ Styles and retaining against Sting. Magnus avoids acknowledging that, saying that Roode's presence was absent when he beat Sting at Bound for Glory and beat Jeff Hardy in the title tournament final. Magnus tells Roode to stop looking at what he does for Dixie as something that deserves a reward and worry about Samoa Joe. Roode reminds Magnus that Joe made him submit last week, but Magnus counters by saying that it was a tag team match, so it didn't matter. He says that when the belt's not at stake, mental strategy trumps ego. Rude says that Magnus needs to let the thought that either he or Joe will face him at lockdown sink in. He sarcastically wishes Magnus luck against Kurt Angle and leaves. For the record, Rude doesn't need to turn face if he were to face Magnus. A heel versus heel matchup can work with the right individuals, and it could work with these two because there would be something valuable on the line in addition to the title. Dixie's favoritism within Dixieland. Of course, the value of that will depend on what her power status is if that match happens. So then we see Dixie Carter and Rockstar Dud backstage in her room. Dixie greets Montel Porter and they sit. She asks him why he stayed anonymous, but before he can answer, Dixie says that she's willing to forget that and concentrate on TNA's days ahead. She wants Porter to give his verbal resume, but she decides that she should put herself over first. Dixie talks about how she built TNA up by herself and made it an international wrestling company. Porter asks her how, and she says that the wrestlers made it so by being proud to be her employees. Dixie says that she respects everyone equally, but Porter tells her that she didn't show that attitude toward Jeff Hardy, Sting, and AJ Styles. She says that if he knew about how a company is run, he would know that bad employees can weaken the foundation. Dixie quickly changes the subject and tells Porter that she is looking forward to teaching him as they work together. He says that they should have their first discussion of changes in the ring in front of the fans. However, Dixie calls him out for acting on his own and making Magnus face Kurt Angle. He implies that she should be thankful that it's a non-title match and leaves. This was a wasted segment that didn't reveal any new information about why Porter is there. Also, this conversation could have been done in the first segment with Porter and Dud. So then we had a non-title match. Magnus versus Kurt Angle. Decent match. The match ends with Angle giving Magnus the triple German. Angle goes for the Angle Slam, but Magnus prevents it by giving Angle a head rake. Angle charges him, but Magnus delivers a side slam. He goes for the pin, but Angle gets the shoulder up. Magnus goes to the top rope, but Angle runs up to the middle rope and delivers a belly-to-belly suplex. Angle goes for the ankle lock, but Ethan Carter III comes into the ring and clips Angle's knee from behind. Ethan delivers a drop kick to Angle's knee and attempts to continue his attack, but Angle kicks him out of the ring. Angle rolls out of the ring and limps as he delivers blows to Ethan. However, Ethan rakes the eyes and then grabs a chair. He slams Angle's knee with the chair twice. Ethan follows Angle back into the ring and applies a leg bar submission to him. The referee finally gets him to break the hold. As medical personnel tend to Angle and eventually put him on a stretcher, Ethan just sits at ringside and watches. Ethan came off very well here. He looked more like the guy that has the promising potential that I spoke of when he first came to the company. In this case, Ethan looked serious, and he looked dangerous. He knew he needed to prove his worth to Dixie, and this may have accomplished that. I would rather see Ethan portrayed like this rather than seeing him do dumb segments with Rockstar Dud. This was a good out for Angle as he needs to rest his body for his eventual match against Ethan at Lockdown. But what about Magnus? He didn't bother to stay and watch Ethan do damage. Was he impressed, or will he still give Ethan static? So then we see Samoa Joe backstage with Kurt Angle, who is on the stretcher. Samoa Joe angrily turns to the camera and tells Dixie that even though she has taken out his fellow comrades, she's going to have to put in serious work to take him out. And if she wants him, she's got him. Joe says that he will destroy Dixieland whether it's a little at a time or all at once. And Samoa Joe is coming off incredibly hard right now, and it's good to watch. So then we see Eric Young backstage. Young says that the reason he had the Monstrous Ball match with Abyss was so that Abyss would engage with him, which would allow Young to show dumbass Joseph Park that he's Abyss. Now that he's done that, he only wonders how Abyss will react. It was refreshing to see Young show a serious tone. As I said before, he's better than this storyline, and hopefully he will move on to something else soon. So then we see Chris Sabin backstage once again in the violet-tinged room. Sabin says that he and Velvet kissed for the first time in this room, and as he takes out a ring box, he says that he has a special surprise for her. Velvet comes into the room and expresses how uncomfortable she is with the cameras present, but they sit. Sabin tells Velvet that they've had their peaks and valleys in their relationship, but when she left him, he was devastated. He says that when that moment happened, it set him straight, and it made him realize what he had to do. Sabin shows Velvet the ring box, and she gets emotional. Velvet opens the box, but there is no ring. Sabin tells her that he has to subtract her from his life because when they were a couple, people only cared about her, even when he was world champion. He says that the only way to show everyone that he is the better half is to face her in a match next week. Sabin tells Velvet that he ends it, not her. He leaves, she cries. So Velvet goes from ending the relationship with Sabin, knowing what type of guy he is, to possibly accepting a wedding proposal from Sabin, knowing what type of guy he is, and now this quote-unquote match next week. Who cares? So then we had the number one contendership match. Samoa Joe versus Robert Roode. Solid match. Match ends with Joe attempting to execute the Muscle Buster, but Roode gets out of his grasp and hits him with an enziguri. Roode follows that by coming off the ropes with a clothesline. He goes for the pin, but Joe kicks out. Roode kicks Joe in the midsection and picks him up for the fireman's carry cutter, but Joe slips out and locks in the rear naked choke in an upright position. Roode escapes and kicks Joe into the corner and follows that with a chop. Roode goes to the opposite corner and charges Joe, but Joe catches him with a uranagi. He takes Roode in the corner, lifts Roode up, and executes the Muscle Buster. He applies the rear naked choke on Roode down on the mat, and Roode taps. The winner of the match, Samoa Joe. This was another match that deserved more time, particularly because of what was on the line for each man. For Roode, it was about him trying so desperately to win this match in order to get the title match that he was already promised. For Joe, after choking out Magnus last week, it was about him maintaining the number one contendership so that he can go on to Lockdown and face Magnus for the title, knowing that Magnus has already tapped out to him. Because of that, there should have been more emphasis placed on this match, and it should have ended the show. So then we see Dixie Carter, Rockstar Dud, and Montel Porter in the ring for their initial meeting in front of the fans. Dixie says that everyone should strive to be everything that Magnus is. She says that in order for the company to grow, the fans and the talent have to become her followers. Dixie says that Porter will be so effective as an investor that he will erase the memories of previous investors from everyone's brains. Porter tells Dixie that her lack of business sense has the company circling the drain, and that she only looks out for those who follow her orders. He says that her throne is about to be toppled. That was the meeting. Show ends. 8 months. TNA wants this to be carried out for a projected time of 8 months. It's not a good sign when something that could have been accomplished in one segment needed 3. As a result, 2 matches that needed more time didn't get it. The James Storm Gunner program wasn't continued. The American Wolves have yet to be seen competing in the ring. No women's match this week. Recently, I said that TNA was a rudderless ship in the middle of the ocean with the water filling it. Now, the rudder has been repaired and they're moving, with most of the water gone. However, there seems to be an anchor on the ocean floor that's dragging the ship. An anchor that appears to be down there for 8 months. I'm Tazmart 2002, and that was my Tna Impact Analysis for February 6, 2014. If you're listening to me on YouTube, please leave your comments below. Click the like or dislike button, and if you subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. If you're listening to me on the Wrestling News Talk Facebook page, please leave your comments below and click the like button if you like what I've been saying. If you have any questions or comments for me about TNA or wrestling in general, you can get at me on Twitter, Tazmart2002, TAZMARK2002. And if your comments exceed the 140, get at me with an email, Tazmart2002@gmail.com. Be sure to listen to the TNA Impact review that I do with Chuck P, live every Sunday morning at 11 o'clock Eastern Time on Chuck P's YouTube channel. I was unable to join Chuck last time, but I will be on next time. Also, check out the archives of any Impact reviews that you may have missed on Chuck's channel. Be sure to check out the YouTube channels in general for both Chuck P and our brother Carl Cleveland. Solid show. Solid show. Because of the large crowds that we have seen on these Impact shows in the UK, a considerable amount of fans have said that TNA should stay there, have their operations headquartered there, have their talent and personnel move there. I think it's safe to say that would be logistically and preferably impossible. So what does TNA need to do to improve their standing in the United States? The independent circuit is the backbone of the wrestling industry. Some indie promotions in this country have been very effective through their marketing strategy as well as their creative strategy. The possibility of taking such ideas and gradually broadening them to the mainstream might work. Just because someone is on a perceived lower level than you doesn't mean that they know less than you do. Maybe it's time to start listening to those who do know rather than those who think they know. I'm Tazmart 2002. Gone.